Hi, here's the lab on process costing. Follow along, stop the video, and duplicate the work. As with all my work in Excel, I recommend you format the entire spreadsheet before you begin any work. Format it for currency without dollar signs and zero decimals. You'll have to adjust some cells and add dollar signs or percentages later, but it's easier and the alignment is nicer if you set it all up now. Here's the problem. RiverCorp has several processing departments. Costs charged to the assembly department for November total $2,280,000. That total comes from the materials, labor, and overhead costs that are shown here. Production records show that 35,000 units were in beginning work in process and were 30% complete as to conversion costs. 660,000 units were started into production, and 25,000 units were in ending work in process. They were 40% complete as to conversion costs. Materials are also added at the beginning of each process. I set up this problem so we can input the data at the top. Then we will do the production cost report and use referencing to these numbers. This will save you some typing. Just remember to use referencing instead of just putting the numbers in by themselves. You really need to understand how to manage this information and do the calculations. So start by adding the initial information as shown. I put the name of the company at the top because it's a report for them. Then look and you can see how I use the information in the problem to set up on the spreadsheet. Students actually miss information that's at the top of tables that are given. So make sure that you see that the total cost for the assembly department is $2,280,000. Then make sure you put in the other costs as shown here. Having the total for the beginning work in process is important, so if it's given to you, it is for you to at least use when you're setting up the problem. Then, using the bottom information, make sure you format the cells to show the percentages. I set it up this way to match the production cost report. The more you make sure to set things up correctly, the better you will be. These are just subtle ways of studying, and it really will help you later. Remember this 25,000 units in ending work in process inventory. We're going to use that in a minute. Now to do the production cost report. Part A is to determine the equivalent units and the units of production cost. As I said, I like to set up the problem like a production cost report. So let's first figure out equivalent units. To do this, we need to set up the units to be accounted for. Using formulas, set up the quantity section as shown, and make sure you use referencing for the numbers from above instead of simply typing the information as shown here. The units to account for are the beginning work in process plus the units started into production. You can't have any more units than that, so that's what we're accounting for. That should be the total at the top and bottom calculations. And for the bottom, it should be there as well because the units completed and those still in production is all we can account for. Now, most of the time, the units accounted for in the bottom calculation are simply reconciled to the top. But sometimes they're not because the information we're given. Remember the 25,000 I mentioned as ending work in process a minute ago? Well, we know the ending inventory and we know we have to account for 695,000 units. So in order to have that reconcile, we must have completed and transferred out the 670,000 units. Now, I'm moving across the columns to calculate equivalent units. We know units completed and transferred out are 100% complete, or they wouldn't have been transferred out. So, for both materials and conversion equivalent units, we simply refer to the number of units that were completed and transferred. But for ending inventory, things are different. For equivalent units for materials, we know materials are added at the beginning of the process. So the materials are 100% complete, and they're the same as those in the work in process row in the accounted for section. But to do it correctly, your Excel formula should be equals the number of units completed and transferred out times the cell with the percentage that is complete. For me, I have cell C10 as my 100% complete. The conversion section has a different set of units but the same formula. Of course, the ones that are completed and transferred out are 100%. They have to be or they wouldn't be transferred out. So that's the number transferred out times your cell that has 100%. Now, using the same formula for the ending work in process equivalent units for conversion costs, you have the number of units in ending inventory times the percentage that is complete. We had that at 40% or 10,000 units. You should then have a total equivalent units of 695,000 units for materials and 680,000 for conversion costs. Now that we have equivalent units, we have to have the unit production cost. Let's set it up for the unit cost and then reconcile it to the cost to be accounted for. Use your formula to add the beginning costs and the cost added to arrive at total materials and conversion costs. Then add a total column. Under that, add it differently in the cost reconciliation schedule. This is very similar to when we did it with units. And when you're finished, if your second calculation matches the first one and matches me, you've done it correctly. Now, on the line below, add a reference formula to automatically copy the total equivalent units for both materials and conversion costs. Then divide the total cost by the equivalent units to get the per unit cost. Because production costs can be very small, take it to 3 decimal places. And then add vertically, add your material cost of $2.40 a unit and conversion cost of 90 cents a unit to give the total completed unit cost of $3.30 a unit. Now, let's apply the costs to inventory. We know the unit costs completed and transferred out were 100% complete. And now we know that the cost of each of those units is $3.30 per unit. So as you can see in the formula bar and in the total itself, the completed and transferred out cost is $2,211,000. As you see in the formula, no B27 is the cell with the number of units transferred out, and E36 is the total cost per unit of $3.30. Then we'll do ending work in process. The ending work in process inventory has materials and conversion costs. The materials portion is the equivalent units of materials in ending work in process inventory times the cost per unit of materials. In the formula bar, you see C28, which is the equivalent units of ending inventory, times C36, the cost of materials per unit, which is the $2.40 per unit. Remember, we use the ending inventory equivalent units because we are computing the work in process of materials in ending inventory. Very similarly, we compute the ending work in process inventory for conversion costs. The conversion cost portion of work in process ending inventory is the equivalent units for conversion cost in ending work in process inventory times the cost per unit of just conversion costs. In the formula bar, you see D28, which is the equivalent units of ending work in process for conversion costs times D36, the cost of conversion per unit. That's the 90 cents per unit. Remember, we use the ending inventory equivalent units because we are computing the work in process of conversion costs in ending inventory. When you add up the materials in work in process ending inventory and the conversion costs in work in process ending inventory, you have an ending inventory for work in process costing $69,000. When you add the costs of inventory completed and transferred out, plus the ending work in process inventory, you have the total cost that you need to account for. That should match the line total cost to be accounted for that you computed earlier. By the way, I added a line at the bottom and I called it the amount to be reconciled. I took the total cost to be accounted for in each part and subtracted one for the other. It isn't part of the production cost report, but it is an easy way to figure out if you've missed something, because the number should be 0. That's it for this lab. Please let me know if you have any questions.